Okay, so good day everyone, especially to our instructor, Ma'am Mercy Aratonel. Good day, ma'am. So, first of all, I just want to introduce myself. I am Rev Austin Elmiso, a third year criminology student of MOIS. So, my topic to be tackled today is about recidivism and habitual delinquency. So, let's start. So, recidivism. So, the basis in recidivism is the greater perversity of the offender as shown by his inclination to commit crimes. So, as to the crimes committed, a recidivist is one who, at the time of his trial for one crime, shall have been previously convicted by final judgment of another crime embraced in the same title of the revised penal code. So, requisites. Number 1, offender is on trial for an offense. Number 2, he was previously convicted by final judgment of another crime. So, both the first and the second offenses are embraced in the same title of the revised penal code. So, offender is convicted of the new offense, meaning at the time of his trial for one crime, it is meant to include everything that is done in the course of the trial from arraignment until after sentence is announced by the judge in open court. So, in recidivism, it is sufficient that the succeeding offense be committed after the commission of the preceding offense, provided at the time of his trial for the second offense that the accused had already been convicted of the first offense. So, as to the period of the time crimes are committed, no period of time between the former conviction and the last conviction is fixed by law. So, meaning recidivism must be taken into account no matter how many years have intervened between the first and the second felonies. So, as to the number of crimes committed, the second conviction for an offense embraced in the same title of the revised penal code is sufficient. So, as to their effects, if not offset by a mitigating circumstance, serves to increase the penalty to the maximum. So, effects of recidivism, if not offset by any mitigating circumstance, the effect is to increase the penalty only to the maximum period. So, for example, of a recidivist is when the accused was convicted previously of homicide and was now convicted of the crime of rape. Both are under Title 8 of Book 2 of the Revised Penal Code, Crimes Against Person. So, let's move to habitual delinquency. So, purpose of the law: to render more effective social defense and the reformation of habitual delinquents. So, in habitual delinquents, the crimes are specified. So, as to the period of the time the crimes are committed, the offender is found guilty of any of the crimes specified within 10 years from his last release or last conviction. So, offender in habitual delinquent, to render more effective. So, in habitual delinquency, offender can be a recidivist and habitual at the same time. When the offender is a recidivist and at the same time habitual delinquent, the penalty for the crime from which will be convicted will be increased to the maximum period unless offset of mitigating circumstance after determining the correct penalty for the last crime committed. And other penalty will be imposed in accordance with Article 62 of the Revised Penal Code. So, as to the number of crimes committed, the accused must be found guilty the third time of tenor of any of the crimes specified. As to their effects, if there is habitual delinquency, an additional penalty is also imposed. So, habitual delinquency distinguished from recidivism. So, as to the number of convictions required, in habitual delinquency, it requires at least a third conviction, while in recidivism requires at least 2. So, as to the crimes involved in habitual delinquency, the crimes are specific, whereas in recidivism, it is enough that they are embraced in the same title. So, as to the intervening period, in habitual delinquency, it requires a conviction within 10 years from the date of the last release of of conviction. So, whereas in recidivism, intervening period is immaterial. So, as to effect, habitual delinquency results to the imposition of an additional penalty, whereas in recidivism results to the penalty being imposed in its maximum period. Then, as to nature, in habitual delinquency, extraordinary aggravating circumstance, while in recidivism, ordinary aggravating which may be offset by a mitigating circumstance. So, next, number 4, those who shall have escaped from confinement or evaded sentence. Note, a minor who escaped from confinement in the reformatory is entitled to the benefits of the law because confinement is not considered imprisonment. So, next is those who have been granted conditional pardon by the President shall have violated the terms thereof. Then next is those whose maximum period of imprisonment does not exceed 1 year. Note, the application of which is based upon the penalty actually imposed in accordance with law. Then, those already serving final judgment upon the approval of this act in December 5, 1935. Then, lastly, in number 8 is those sentenced to the penalty of distero or suspension. So, let's move to discretion of court to fix minimum. So, in determining the minimum penalty, the law obligates the courts to fix the penalties with the widest discretion that the courts have ever had. So the determination of the minimum term is left entirely within the discretion of the court to fix it anywhere within the range of the penalty next lower without reference to the periods into which it may be subdivided. This obviously applies only for offenses under the Revised Penal Code or RPC. So take note that whenever any prisoner who shall have served the minimum penalty imposed on him, the Board of Indeterminate Sentence may, in its discretion and in accordance with the rules and regulations adopted thereunder, authorize the release of such prisoner on parole. If during the period of surveillance, such parole shall show himself to be a law-abiding citizen and shall not violate any of the laws of the Philippines, the board may issue a final certificate of release in his favor. Whenever any prisoner released on parole shall, during the period of surveillance, violate any of the conditions of his parole, the board may issue an order for his rearrest and shall serve the remaining unexpired portion of the maximum sentence. So, the application of the indeterminate sentence law is mandatory if the imprisonment would exceed 1 year. It would be favorable to the accused. So, that's all for my report and God bless.